Hi everyone, I'm Lisa, 30 years old, and I want to share a story that I've never talked about before. I was born and raised in Ohio, but my family originally comes from Eastern Europe. I'm an average height blonde, and I've been married to my husband, Jake, for 17 years. Jake is a true Midwestern guy, born and raised in a small town just outside Cincinnati. We met when we were both working at a riverside restaurant. I was waiting tables, and so was he. We hit it off right away and got married after dating for a short while. Now, 17 years later, we have 2 kids and a pretty happy life together. After we got married, I left my job and became a full-time homemaker. Jake inherited a large piece of land from his father on the outskirts of town, and over the years, we turned it into a small farm. We raise sheep and goats, and right now, we have about 200 sheep on our farm. Every summer, we take the sheep up to a remote countryside area where we have a small, cozy cabin. It's simple, just 2 rooms, but it's peaceful. Our kids stay back in town with Jake's parents while we spend the summer up in the hills, enjoying the fresh air and taking care of the animals. Last summer, something happened that changed everything. One early morning, Jake and I were having a quiet, intimate moment together when our dogs suddenly started barking like crazy. We have 4 big farm dogs, and they don't bark unless there's a reason. We quickly got dressed and rushed outside. Parked right in front of our cabin, on the dirt road, was a huge camper van. The dogs were circling it, growling and barking. The people inside hadn't stepped out yet, and we stood there, waiting to see who they were. After a moment, the camper door opened, and a man and a woman stepped out. They smiled and waved at us. They were tourists, traveling across the U.S. in their camper van. From their accents, we quickly realized they were foreigners, but they spoke pretty good English. Jake and I welcomed them, offered them a place to sit, and I went inside to make some lemonade. That's when Jake followed me into the kitchen with a mischievous grin. "What do you think?" he whispered. I knew exactly what he was implying, but I laughed it off, thinking he was joking. "Stop it," I said, rolling my eyes. But Jake was serious. "Come on," he insisted. "When will we ever get a chance like this again?" I froze for a moment. My heart pounded, but Jake's eyes were locked on mine, waiting for an answer. After a long pause, I exhaled. "Fine," I whispered, "but this was your idea." I took the lemonade outside, set it on the table, and sat down with the tourists. We chatted in broken English, trying to understand each other. Turns out, they were from Australia, taking a road trip across America. They pulled out a map and told us they were heading to Yellowstone next. They asked if there was a good breakfast spot nearby. Jake grinned and said, "Well, we haven't had breakfast yet either. Why don't you eat with us?" They excitedly agreed. The woman and I headed inside to cook, while the guys stayed outside, talking. We set the table with farm eggs, cheese, fresh bread, fruit, and homemade butter. I brewed some coffee, and we all sat down to eat. They loved it. We laughed, told stories, and had a great time. That's when Jake suddenly said, "You should stay the night here. No need to rush." The tourists glanced at each other, and then the man smiled. "Why not?" After breakfast, Jake suggested we have some drinks. He pulled out a bottle of whiskey, grabbed his old guitar, and started playing some songs. The tourists had never tried whiskey straight before, and by the second round, everyone was feeling warm and chatty. The mood shifted. Slowly, the laughter turned into lingering glances. The conversation got quieter, the energy in the air heavier. And then, everything just happened. The woman gravitated toward Jake, while the man leaned in closer to me. Nobody hesitated. Nobody questioned it. It just felt like an unspoken agreement. The night blurred into a mix of laughter, whispered words, and something none of us expected but didn't resist. After a while, we all needed a break. We took turns showering, and I went into the kitchen to prepare some honey yogurt for everyone. It was refreshing, and soon enough, we were laughing again. But it didn't end there. That same energy pulled us right back in, and once again, we all let it happen. By the time we finally collapsed onto the makeshift beds, exhaustion had taken over. The tourists fell asleep instantly, and Jake and I retreated to our own corner. The next morning, I woke up to find Jake already up, sitting beside the woman. Meanwhile, the man slowly stirred awake and turned to me, his eyes warm with familiarity. It didn't take long before the morning followed the rhythm of the night before. Later, we had breakfast together, and then it was time for them to leave. They hugged us, thanked us repeatedly, and with bright smiles, they got back into their camper van and drove away. Once they were gone, I turned to Jake. We looked at each other for a long moment. Then, without a word, we went back to our usual routine. We never talked about it again. It was as if nothing had ever happened. Just another summer in the hills. Just another quiet secret we'd never share. Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to Infidelity Stories for more stories.